Hey, Greta, let me make it really easy for everybody watching at home. On the one hand, the White House wants a deal. For history's sake, they want to say that we've done something completely different and counterintuitive when compared to the way previous administrations have handled the Iranian regime. The Iranians actually do want a deal because the dollars that would flow in, if not for international sanctions, could really be a game changer for the regime at home. But the real problem is, as you pointed out, is this sort of saving face. You heard your guest earlier talking about sort of the political saber rattling, if you will, trying to save face at home by saying no deal will happen unless the sanctions are lifted immediately. Well, I want to share with you viewers a couple of guys that they need to keep in mind as this sort of plays out over the days, months, and even perhaps years to come. One of them is a senator from the state of Tennessee. His name is Bob Corker. He's the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he is now pushing forward with legislation that would really hold the president's feet to the fire. It would make it impossible for the administration to do any deal without congressional approval, and it would also limit the sanctions that the president could then lift on the Iranian people. The other gentleman is Mark Kirk. He's a senator from Illinois. Keep him in mind as well because he already has down the line legislation that would make it even tougher on the Iranians. In fact, it would add new sanctions if a deal falls apart. So, Greta, clearly there are a number of interests both on the Hill and internationally that are looking at this deal very carefully. Right now, it looks like the Iranians are saying, hey, without lifting all the sanctions right away, we're not going to play ball. And that could scuttle the deal for everybody.
Kevin, there's also a report that Iran is saying that the military would be strictly off limits for foreign inspections. So it looks like even that sort of unfettered inspections, we wouldn't get that.
Well, you said it perfectly, and keep this in mind, too. You've heard about the IAEA, right? That's the International Atomic Energy Agency. Without them being able to actually get in there, Greta, and take a very close look at what's happening, you don't know what they're doing. And we've already seen on many occasions that the Iranian regime has simply not been forthcoming, and I'm being generous by saying it that way, in dealing with the international community as it relates to their nuclear ambitions. And so without that aspect as well, it's hard to see a pathway forward for any meaningful change as it relates to both the U.S. and the P5+1 partnership to ever take place.
Kevin, thank you. And today, also taking to Twitter, blasting the Obama administration's claims about the nuclear deal. Iran's leader tweeting, I trust our negotiators, but I'm really worried as the other side is into lying and breaching promises. An example was the White House fact sheet. So is this deal off the rails before it even gets started? Was President Obama had by Iran? Critics have been warning against the deal from the very beginning.
This agreement is not only flawed, but it's dangerous.
We cannot rely on the word of Iran.
This deal is not based on trust.
I can't think of a worse negotiator for America than Barack Obama.
It is based on unprecedented verification.
There's really no verification that's meaningful.
The United States is ceding ground to a rogue state that's been the central banker for terrorism for 35 years, that's on the verge of getting nuclear weapons.
And Representative Ron DeSantis joins us. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So let me get this straight. While Iran is calling us deceitful, basically liars, devilish is one word in tweets, saying that in order to have a deal, they must lift the sanctions immediately, but the U.S. says that's not going to happen, and saying that the military would be off the limits in terms of inspections. And meanwhile, the U.S. is insulting our ally on Twitter, picking on Prime Minister Netanyahu. Do we have a deal with Iran?
Well, absolutely not. I mean, I hope we don't have a deal along the lines of what the Ayatollah wants. I mean, what the Ayatollah is basically saying is that the United States needs to totally surrender to everything Iran wants. And I've been very critical of the deal as President Obama has explained it, because I think that essentially legitimizes Iran's nuclear program. I don't think the inspections would be effective. There would be military sites that would be totally off limit, and then it would sunset in 10 years, so it essentially paves Iran's path to the bomb. So that's, as the White House understands it, the deal I think will go over like a lead balloon in Congress. And then when you have the Ayatollah making these comments, I mean, come on, is this somebody that we're going to want to do business with? The sanctions relief that he wants will allow Iran to foment all type of mischief throughout the Middle East as they are doing now. And that's something that's not good for our national security.
You know what I think is the biggest deal breaker out of these two, the other news today, the two being, one is to lift the sanctions immediately, because the U.S. has never indicated that it would lift the sanctions immediately. But the bigger problem is the military sites will be off limits to inspections, because remember what they did, what Iran did with Fodor, which is the underground enrichment facility that we didn't even know about for years, and they tricked us. Why in the world could we ever, how could we possibly agree that Iran could have these, spots that we could never check out?
And why do you need, under the administration's explanation, Fordo, this underground fortified facility, would still be able to be running? They would say, oh, it's just a nuclear research site. Well, why would you need to have an underground fortified site if you're just conducting academic research? And the president laid down a red line on Fordo a year and a half ago. He said they don't need Fordo. Any final deal has got to get rid of Fordo, and yet there it is.
Am I being distracted by this White House tweet insulting Prime Minister Netanyahu, or does it have some significance?
I think it has some significance. For whatever reason, the president does not get along with the Prime Minister of Israel. Israel's our best ally in the region, and I think you need to get over whatever type of personal animosity you may have for another leader on that level and look at what the interests of our countries are. Prime Minister Netanyahu has a very small country, and this Ayatollah says they want to wipe them off the map. So yes, he's been very involved in this, and he wants to make sure that a bad deal is not agreed to. But can you honestly blame him? And for them to keep trying to needle him, I think it's bad for the relationship between our two countries, and I definitely don't think it's productive in terms of trying to get Congress to see things your way.
Well, I guess I would be much prouder of the administration if they were having conversations with Netanyahu directly, any of their disagreements, and they may have big disagreements, but the idea that they get so petty and take to social media to insult him, I don't see how that in any way advances anything, but it makes us look really bad, and I think it makes the administration look really bad.
I concur, and it's just not the way to conduct diplomacy. And our relationship with Israel, with this White House, is at really an all-time low, and I think that that's just very unfortunate.
Congressman, thank you.